Good morning. My name is Dr. John Taylor Kent. I was able to shut the air conditioning off so that we could have a moment of relative peace and quiet so I could get a good audio recording here for you. And I woke up a little after 4 in the morning after getting aroused a little bit. I want to figure out what's important to tell you. And this particular day is the 5th of August, early in the morning, before sunrise. And I'm trying to figure out what's important to tell you today. And I think what's important to know is, why is the Bible important? What is the relevance of the Bible? I mean, why bother with this old book? It's because this is the foundations for this earth age, basically. The 12,000 period that we're living in right now. I refer to that as an earth age. We're at the end of it. Not the end of the earth. Could be the end of the earth as you and I know it, though, because we could experience a cataclysm that's going to be so massive that it's going to be the end for most of us. And of course, the earth will be refreshed and we'll start anew. There will be a new beginning. There will be a genesis, a regenesis of the earth, of the face of the earth. From what I can tell, looking at the geological record, we have layers in the strata, particularly out west. You can see these in the folds in the mountains. And each one of those layers of white rock, light-colored rock, sand-colored rock, sandstone or limestone, is an earth age. Okay, and so as you see in those rocks, there are many layers, many folds, many earth ages. That's the geological record. So each one of those layers is an earth age. It shows the beginning and the end of one of these 12,000 year periods. And about every fifth layer is a layer of black basalt, dark basalt, tar-like. That, to me, is what I would call a grand earth age. I don't know what else to call it right now. I've never thought of that, and I don't think anybody else has. And that occurs about every fifth layer. So, I don't know how I come up with 125,000 years earlier, because if you have a 12,000 year earth age, every fifth layer is about every 60,000 years. Anyway, there's layers upon layers of these. It's like the earth is a giant clock. We're part of the mechanism of a giant clock. The earth goes around our sun, and the sun in turn carries the earth along, trailing behind it as the sun blazes a course through space. Now, it's not just a random course. We're actually on a circuit that takes us around the Milky Way. So our entire solar system rotates around the center of this Milky Way, the galaxy. And there are time periods on that. And we are coming into one of those time periods, one of those zones physically and temporally, during which the Earth is typically destroyed to a large extent. Continents sink and continents rise. Atlantis sank and things rise. Now, I believe that we are in the latter times of this earth age. And why is the Bible important? Because it tells you where we are in that, and it tells you what's about to happen. Perhaps even more important than that, the Bible gives us our identity. It tells us who we are. And it goes a step further than that. It also identifies the bad guys. And I know a lot of you are going to say, well, No, everybody can be saved. There are no bad guys. Well, I disagree with you. And I believe that this Bible is a wake-up call. It's a wake-up call for us to live properly and us to live in harmony and for us to rule with God. Notice I said with, not to rule for, not to rule against, but with God. The most important thing about that preposition is it means we're not supposed to do it alone. We cannot do it alone. I believe that's why the Bible is important, is because this basically is the mind of God. This puts us online with Yahweh, Creator Father's will. I don't think there's another way to get His will. Yes, we can sit around and we can pray for His will. And we can wait and be patient and hope that He reveals it to us. Hope that our will comes in line with His will. And His will is natural law. He doesn't go against the law. The natural law, according to His creation, it's right here. And we need to abide by it because it's basically the rules, if you will, upon which this world of ours, this universe of ours, was built. I love this little Bible, and it's called the proper name version of the King James Bible. And the preface of it is wonderful. I scanned through it. I think the importance is to understand that Isaiah, the greatest prophet that was ever, had the greatest vision of any of the prophets. He saw the longest timelines from beginning to end. His vision covered a longer span of time than all the other prophets. He made some profound statements. And at the end of this preface, quotes Isaiah 52:6. Therefore, my people shall know my name. Therefore, they shall know in that day that I am He that does speak. Behold, it is I. So there comes a day in which we will know His name. And I think that we're at that point, at this point in our time in history, during this particular earth age, in which we do need to know His name. And we also need to understand the name Israel. So Yahweh comes from the Tetragrammaton, letters Y, H, V, H, in Paleo-Hebrew. Tetra, four-letter word, four-letter name. And as far as Yahweh, which is 6 letters, we get that by filling in the vowels A and E, and there were no vowels in Paleo-Hebrew. The Phoenician alphabet was limited. I'm no scholar, I'm just a Bible reader. So there's a few letters in the Hebrew alphabet, and they certainly don't include the vowels, which we need if we're going to be able to communicate, read something, speak, and all of that. So we basically filled in those 2 extra letters. Why is it important? Well, it says that it's through this name that we will be saved. And actually, that name Yahweh precedes Yahshua. And Yahshua, Y-A-H-S-U-A, is the name of Jesus. That's the real name, the original name. So it's not the name of Jesus that saves. It's the original name, Yahshua, that saves. Why do I bring that up? Because I think the name Jesus was given to throw us off a little bit. I believe that the name Jesus didn't come up until the time the King James Bible came about. We also have a continuation of the same errors that Ptolemy II made in about 275 BC. What was Ptolemy doing? Was his error? Well, he was producing the Greek version of the Septuagint. The reason being that the Israelites, the bulk of the Israelites, in particular the northern 10 tribes, were in dispersion. They went into dispersion, let's just say somewhere around 622 BC. That's way before Yahshua, who you call Jesus, was born and crucified. Okay? Way before then. So the Israelites proper, the bulk of them at the time of the birth of Yahshua and during his life and his death, weren't even in the Middle East. The bulk of them went to Greece. And because of that, we had to produce a Septuagint. And that's what Ptolemy II did in Alexandria, Egypt, is he gave us the Septuagint. He also gave us some errors. And one of those is he took the word Yahweh and pulled it out of the Bible. And every time he pulled out of the Bible, he put in the generic noun, if you will, the classification, God. You see, there's a lot of gods. We put a small g on that with an s on the end, plural. So the Israelites had gods of their enemies. Their enemies had gods. They were different. And the Israelites came out of a polytheistic society. Abraham came out of Haran. His father was Terah. And we know that Abraham caused some mischief. Namely, he damaged his father's gods. And Abraham yielded himself up to Yahweh. It was Yahweh who called him out and told him to go to a land he will show him. So he left Haran, traveled the length of the Fertile Crescent to the other side of it, close to the Mediterranean. And there was the land of Canaan, the promised land. Now I'm going to jump to, well, it's the way I do things here. I apologize to it. I'd love to be able to cover other things, but as I'm inspired and my mind is working, I'm going to cover some things here. So I've already covered a little bit about the name. Now I'm going to change subjects on you, and I'm going to go to aliens. A lot of people want to know if there's any aliens. Is there any other life in the universe? For some reason, we've got it fixed in us as a species that we're so important that the world revolves around us. That the Earth was the center of the universe. It took us a long time to figure out that the Earth was not the center of the universe, and a lot of us haven't figured out that we are not the center of the universe individually. So, the Bible does reveal that there's life in the universe, life in the other planets. Genesis chapter 2, verse 4. These are the generations of the heaven and of the earth, when they were created, in the day that Yahweh God made the earth and the heavens. Okay, that's the entire fourth verse. Generations means mortals, means those who live. Now, I got this from Pastor Jerry Wiki, and he emphasized over and over that this passage right here tells us a couple of things. It tells you that this book, Genesis in particular, and the Bible as a whole, is a story about those who live on the earth and those who live in the heavens. So it's about the mortals, people who have lives, lifespans, who are born and who die. So there are mortals in the heavens and mortals on the earth. So there the Bible answers your alien question. But we need to take it a step further. What you'll find when you read carefully is that the aliens were basically driven out of heaven. They abandoned their first estate and they were forced to the earth. And if we read this carefully enough, we find out that it was an angel, an alien, that had sex with Eve and produced a hybrid named Cain, disturbing the natural order, bringing murder on the earth. We got the first murder recorded in the book of Genesis, and that is Cain using an assault rock to murder his brother Abel. It may seem pretty simple. It may just seem like, what's it matter? Well, it matters, because in order for you to understand the world today, you need to be able to identify the enemy. You need to know who the enemy is. And I'm going to tell you that you don't. Why don't you know the enemy? Because you haven't read the Bible. So by reading the Bible, you find out who you are. But in order to get there, you find out who the enemy is. So the enemy is the entity, the being, the angel, the alien who fathered Cain. That's the father. That's the devil. That's the father of the devil's children. It's the devil. I prefer to think of him not as Satan. Everybody wants to give him the name Satan. I think that's a class of being, a class of people, a class of fallen angel, if you will. What we do know is that when we read the Bible carefully, Eve complains that she was seduced by the serpent. So Eve blames it on the serpent. He seduced me. And as a result, she gave birth to Cain. And Cain, in turn, murdered his half-brother Abel. And the descendants of Cain occupied, and that's why we have what's called the land of Canaan. These are the descendants of the fallen angels. These are hybrids. These are not part of Yahweh, Creator, Father God's natural order. They violated the natural order, and they rule the world today. These are the bad guys. And so you're called to understand this. For your own self-defense, you need to understand this. So that's why it's important that you read the Bible, so that you're educated, so that you can understand this particular story that's in this book, and understand that this is where the battle started. This is where the war started that we are in today, and we are at the culmination of it. And in order for you to prevail, in order for us to prevail, we have to understand our place in creation. We have to understand who the bad guys are, and we have to understand who we are. I think it's important that we have open minds. You know, we would have thought of those bad guys not as fallen angels, imaginary beings. I think we would recognize them a little bit easier if we called them what they are. Aliens. Okay? Now, what does that make us? Well, in the larger scheme of things, I think that we come from different planets on this planet. I think we have several species that were populated on this planet at different times, no less. And I believe that we, Israel, are very important in this. Israel means he who rules with God. Israel, he who rules with God, not against God. That's very important. Not without God. That might even be more important, because today we operate without God. We operate without Yahweh. Why? Because we don't read our Bibles. Our founders of this nation were all reared upon the Bible. This was the first book. This is what everybody learned how to read on. It was so important that it became part of the college entrance examinations. In the early days of our nation, when you wanted to go to college, the entrance examination was you had to take a chapter, and they picked the chapter for you, and they sat you down, and your assignment was to translate it. And you had to be able to translate a chapter of the Bible into Hebrew. You had to understand Hebrew and be fluent in it. Hebrew and Aramaic. So you had to translate it into Hebrew. And then you had to take that chapter that you had produced in Hebrew, and you had to translate it from Hebrew into Greek. So you were expected to know the ancient languages before you could get entrance into college. Why was that? Well, they didn't consider us educated unless we knew the original languages so that we could study the original works in their original language and so that we would be able to come to an understanding of them. So you and I today are illiterate. We are not educated. I certainly don't know Hebrew, and I don't know Greek. The saying, "it's Greek to me," has meaning for us today. And Greek is noted as being a far more accurate language than Hebrew. The meanings of the words are more specific. What's odd is if you look at the medical profession, the body, as they discovered it, dissected it, and studied it, it was all named in Latin names. So you really have to study Latin to understand the body. I wanted to say medicine. But the crazy thing is that all the medicines are done in Greek names. All those chemical names, their roots are in Greek. So you've got a profession in which the body, the client, if you will, is described in Latin, a derivative of more modern language than Hebrew. Yet the cures, the treatments are all done in Greek. Talk about a system that leads to problems. So, the good guys are descendants of Adam and Eve's second son, Seth. That's an important name, yet we don't recognize it. So Seth was basically the survivor. He's the one through which we all descended from, Seth. Now, Abel, having been removed from the earth, we didn't come from him. And there's people that come from Cain, the land of Canaan, the Canaanites. It's very important because that was where the great error, the great sin occurred, the battle. And that was what we call the original sin. Now, I would like to point out to you that the only way we are going to have peace upon this earth is that we take our proper place and that we roll with God. And how do we do that? Well, one of the things we do is we don't get in his way. We stay out of his way. And if you know the natural law, you can avoid problems with Yahweh. Because basically that's what the Ten Commandments are. They've encoded the natural motivations. Hold on a second. I'm going to stop this right now. There's a noise outside.